ride with me to the other clans and we will defeat the sky people.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Hello, and welcome out there in podcast and YouTube land. We are so glad that you have joined us for a very Carpenter Christmas here at Johnny Has the Keys. We are a podcast and YouTube channel that talks about movies, television, key influences on those particular subjects of the week, and then things that those movies then in turn influenced, their key references. We've been doing it for a while. If you're new to us, though, wow, great. We'd love to hear how you found us. If you could just drop a little note down below and or send us an email if you want to, or however you want to do it, and let us know how you found us. We would appreciate that a lot. If you're listening or watching us on YouTube, we'd love for you to subscribe, do all the things that you have to do in the litany that you hear every freaking YouTube channel, which is subscribe, ring the bell, give us a review, all those kind of things. My name is David.
We would love it if you would do that.
We would love all that, but we're just not going to take the time to do it right now, even though we just did. Yes. Anyway, and my name is David. I'm here with my co-host Tim. Tim, how's it going? What you been doing?
Merry Christmas. I'm doing well. I am doing very well. I decided, as far as my genre topic this week, we would do what we did last year on the Christmas episode with Creep Show.
Yes.
It's kind of a little status thing as to where we're at as far as movies we've covered over 4.5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of hint at what we've done in 5 seasons. Anyway, I created a list, and let me give the criteria for this list so people understand what it is.
Okay.
Basically, it is only directors that have potential for multiple coverage on our show. There are some directors we have covered, and it is highly unlikely we'll ever cover another film. That could be because it's just a really obscure film, obscure director that only did one horror movie, or it could be someone like Jonathan Demme, who did Silence of the Lambs, didn't really do any other horror movies, and now he's dead, so he's not going to do another one.
Right.
So these are people we will likely see again. Of the ones that we have done that have only had one film, we've only done one film by these directors. These are going to have 2 as of the end of this season. So I'm not going to tell you what we're doing because I don't want to give away to the people out there what movies we're covering. But the ones that will graduate from 1 to 2 this season are Don Coscarelli, and we did Bubba Hotep.
Yeah.
Sam Raimi, we did The Evil Dead season 1.
Never heard of that movie. What's it about?
Richard Donner. We did The Omen.
Yeah.
Ari Aster, we did Hereditary. So as you see, folks, if you think about it, you might get a good idea what could be potentially coming up on the latter half of this season.
Yes.
Guillermo del Toro, we did Pan's Labyrinth. And Paul Verhoeven, we did Starship Troopers.
Yes.
All of those directors have movies coming up the second half of this season.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that we have put together that we're going to cover later on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right, moving on. Directors that have 2 films that we've covered and some that are going up to 3 by the end of this season are Wes Craven. We did A Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream.
Yep.
Did I say Screet? I think I said
Scream.
Street.
Yeah. Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah.
Kind of combine them there. Terrence Fisher, we did The Devil Rides Out and The Horror of Dracula. Yes. Believe it or not, we're doing another Terrence Fisher. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. This one blew my mind. Nathan Duran.
He did Deadly Mantis, though.
He did Deadly Mantis.
Yes.
He did 20 Million Miles to Earth, and he's doing another one that we have coming up. So.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
And then this one is not so surprising. Mike Flanagan, we have covered the Hill House series first season as well as Dr. Sleep, and we are going to do another of his this season as well.
Yeah, that was our only series watch, right? We did the entire Haunting of Hill House each episode.
We did.
Right?
We did 10 episodes on that big bad boy.
And it was worth it because it was great. But anyway.
It was a long time ago. Back
we should have done it with
only.
We should have done it with Midnight Mass, but just saying. Anyway.
We did a bonus episode though.
True.
Midnight
true.
Mass. I think it's available on Patreon.
Yep.
Anyway, okay. So those are the ones that are going to go up to 3 this season. However, we have several others that we've done 2 of that I will list. Quite a bit actually. They are Christopher Nolan. We did The Prestige and Interstellar.
Yep.
Robert West. We just covered Dr. Phibes and Dr. Phibes Rises Again. Probably won't be doing any more of his, but we did have multiples there.
Volnavia. Yes.
Toby Hooper, we've done Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Salem's Lot.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Whedon, we've done Serenity and the Avengers.
Yep.
Brian De Palma, we've done Carrie and Sisters. James Whale, we've done Frankenstein and the Invisible Man. Luc Besson, we've done The Fifth Element and Lucy.
Yep.
David Cronenberg, we've done The Brood and The Fly. Danny Boyle, we've done Sunshine. 28 Days Later. Denis Villeneuve, we've done Blade Runner 2049 and Arrival.
Yep.
Alfonso Cuarón, we've done Gravity and Children of Men. Alfred Hitchcock, we've done Psycho and The Birds. Jacques Tourneur, we've done Cat People and Curse of the Demon. Richard Fleischer, we've done Fantastic Voyage and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Man, he's good. Yep.
And the Russo brothers, those 2 Avengers movies, Infinity War and Endgame.
Yep.
So as you can see, I mean, there are several directors we have covered multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
Which I guess speaks to, I mean, this was just a little experiment on my part. I guess it kind of speaks to how directors gravitate towards our genre multiple times.
Or toward their genres, their niche genres that they do. You know, Hitchcock wasn't known for his comedies, you know, kind of things. Because I think they tend to find, you know, what we've learned through the podcast is they tend to find their skill sets where they go, and that's where they, you know, focus and concentrate.
Well, but then you also have, on the other hand, someone like Danny Boyle who just jumps into every genre.
Yes.
You know, comedy, musical, horror, sci-fi, what have you.
Right.
So I think that's kind of interesting.
There are those virtuosos, you know, but then again, you also have, you know, that head violinist, and that's what they do, and they do that best, you know. But then you could have all other musicians who are multiple musicians. So yeah,
right.
Yeah.
The list of course is going to get a little bit less as we go. Last year we had 4 of these. This year we're up one with 5, and that is people that we've covered 3 times. George Miller did, we've done Mad Max, Road Warrior, and the Mad Max Fury Road. So we've basically all in that same universe.
Oh yeah.
We've covered, here's another one of those virtuoso directors, Robert Wise. He didn't stick to genres. We've covered The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Andromeda Strain, and The Haunting. And
we're probably going to cover West Side Story soon.
Yeah. Wouldn't surprise me. I love that movie.
Anyway. I
do too. George Romero, we've covered Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Creepshow.
Mm-hmm.
Stanley Kubrick, we've covered The Shining, 2001, and A Clockwork Orange. And Ridley Scott, we've covered Alien, Blade Runner, and The Martian.
Yes. Excellent directors.
Yes. And as we go further into the next category, there are no directors with 4 entries this season, and we only had 1 in season 4.
Mm-hmm.
Cameron, who went up 1. He was 4 last season. Now he's 5. So So there's none in that category. So the next category we have 2 directors that have 5 entries in this season. And
so we've covered 5 of their films on the podcast already.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And those 2 directors are James Cameron, who I just mentioned, The Abyss, Terminator, Terminator 2, Aliens, and Avatar, your favorite.
My favorite. Can't
And
wait
then-
for the sequel.
And then as of today, with our John Carpenter Christmas, we have covered 5 John Carpenter films.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be The Thing, Halloween, Escape from New York, In the Mouth of Madness, and of course, today we are going to cover The Fog.
Wow. So those are our 2 biggest. We've covered them the most.
No, there's another.
Okay.
We are up to one that we have covered 6 times, thanks to you. And his name is Steven Spielberg.
The master, the god,
Yes.
the great one. Yes.
And we have done Minority Report, E.T., Close Encounters, Jaws, Ready Player One, and AI.
And I think I've got like 4 more on the list. So yes, we should definitely. I'm sure he will. Hopefully he'll remain the king.
He might. I don't know. John Carpenter's creeping up there.
But I'm curious. Have we never done an Alfred Hitchcock film?
We've done
Ever?
2.
You didn't mention Hitchcock, did you?
Yeah, I did.
When you
Maybe I
did-
skipped him by accident.
No, because we did Birds and we did
the
Psycho.
Birds and Psycho.
Yep, you're right. You're right. Sorry, my fault. Just cut that out.
But I may have overread. I may have skipped him by accident.
No.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
sure
on
you're
there.
right. Yep.
And then lastly, before we move on, I just wanted to mention directors that have potential for future candidates of multiple films with us, because these are people we have done one of that could easily fall into more than one. And they are the Wachowskis, Jordan Peele, Dario Argento, T. West, Alex Garland, Ken Russell, Stuart Gordon, M. Night Shyamalan, Andre Uverdahl, David Fincher, Roy Ward Baker, Fritz Lang, Zack Snyder, Bong Joon-ho, Roger Corman, George Lucas, Robert Eggers, David Lynch, Ryan Johnson, Neil Jordan, Roman Polanski, Douglas Trumbull, Bernard Rose, Nicholas Meyer, Edgar Wright, Clive Barker, Jack Arnold, Neil Marshall, Terry Gilliam. I had Guillermo on there. We're already going to do him. Todd Browning and Robert Zemeckis. Oh, wait. I've got more. Peter Hyams, Chuck Russell, Jack Shoulder, Kenji Fukasaku, Robert Rodriguez, Sean Byrne, Joe Dante, Matt Reeves, Dan Trachtenberg, Mario Bava, and Jon Favreau. That's a lot.
So wait, all of those we've done one of theirs already.
Yes.
Okay.
But they all dive in and out of the genre, so it's easy that we could hit another one.
And I know we had talked, because this came up, I think, through Patreon, that we had talked about maybe doing a separate Patreon episode just on Roger Corman and his influence and everything.
We've
else.
considered that.
So that might be interesting too. If you guys are out there listening, watching, or interested, that might be something we could focus on.
I literally thought Roger was going to go up 1 to 2 this season. And but one of the films we have coming up in the latter half of this season was produced by him, not directed. So,
and Bong Joon-ho, we did Busan, right? That's Train to Busan.
That is him? It is, I think. Yeah, it's Train to Busan.
Yes. That's the one we covered that he did. No?
Is he the same guy? It's the same guy that did Parasite.
Yes.
And he also,
yeah. I think he did the host. I think you're right.
I was going to say it may be the host.
Yeah. Yeah, one or the other. But yeah, we've had, I mean, not to sit on our laurels sort of thing, but we've covered a lot of movies and we have covered a lot of directors. And it's very interesting that because part of what we do is those influences that come from it, and directors do influence their projects. I mean, tremendously. It's their vision kind of thing.
It is. And to get back to Bong Joon-ho briefly, he did do The Host, but he also did Parasite and your favorite, Snowpiercer.
No,
could eventually end up on here.
It could. It could. We'll have fun with that episode, let me tell you. That'll be Avatar 2 sort of thing. Well, that's interesting. And thanks for putting that list together, because that's crazy that we've got that many, I mean, great auteurs that we have discussed or talked
Well,
about.
it takes a hot minute to put that damn list together. And it would be a lot easier if I did it at the end of a season or the beginning of a season than in the middle, because
And
that's
having to
when,
look forward and back
yeah,
and everything.
this
Yeah.
is coming up and I don't want to say too much, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
what
good
is going
genre
on in your
week. You
world?
spent some good genre week time there.
I did. I did.
Mine was really interesting because it kind of is it's a huge extended segue into our episode today, because rather than get distracted by other stuff, I kind of got Carpenter obsessive. I mean, this is our, what, fourth Christmas? I mean, this is Carpenter Christmas. So this is our fifth movie
It's our
by
third
Carpenter
in a row.
Yeah, that we're covering. And so I started thinking about the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Carpenter. So I watched a couple of biographies of him, behind the scenes. One came from a YouTube channel that was based on Film School Archives, is the name of it, Film School Archives. And they do these archival biographies on all these great directors, Wes Craven and Steven Spielberg and yada, yada. But I watched, got a lot of information from that one based on Carpenter. So this was a guy who was born in Carthage, New York, but grew up kind of near us, grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Yeah, I knew that.
And grew there, moved there, became, an outsider because he was a Yankee family living in Bowling Green, Kentucky at the time in the, late, in the early 50s and mid 50s kind of thing. So it was not much different from what it is now in the South, but a little bit. Sort of thing. Anyway, very influenced in his youth by a movie called It Came from Outer Space, which is on our list. We still haven't covered it, but we need to probably one of these years. And what he loved about it as a child was the fact that it scared him. The meteor coming in the beginning and streaking across the sky and blowing up scared him so much he ran to the back of the theater. And he went, wow, how could this flat thing up there on this flat wall do that to me? And that became his obsession for life. Being the outsider kid that he was, he, of course, read all the comic books. So he mentions in EC Comics, Weird Science, Tales from the Crypt. All of those were his, reading material.
Horror.
Found it very interesting that his family did not own a television when he was growing up. All through elementary school and high school, he never had a television, so wasn't influenced by television. One of his biggest hobbies, though, other than comic books, was music, because his father had a PhD in music and was a music teacher and everything else. So he learned all about music from his dad, which makes sense because, I mean, I can't think of and I thought this question, can you think of another director that writes their own music?
Not many. No.
Yeah. I couldn't think of one. I could not think of one. It was going, wow. So anyway, then much like Steven Spielberg, one of my favorites, and even myself, because it happened to me too, when he was about 8 years old, his father gave him an 8mm camera and an editor and everything else. So he started making little bitty short movies. And he said he knew from the age of 9 that he wanted to be a film director. Even growing up in Bowling Green, Kentucky, he wanted to be a film director. And his father and mother basically said, no, get a real job kind of thing, like all of our parents did, sort of thing. But in 1968, he reached a point in his life where he said he had to make a decision because, as he said in this one interview, he says, I was in a rock and roll band and we were doing pretty good. I mean, I was meeting a lot of girls, making a lot of money, and I was pretty happy. But I got accepted to USC, which was the leading film school in the country. And so I had to decide, do I want to move all the way across the country and do my dream? And I said, yeah. So he did. He got accepted. He went to USC. And he says he credits the film school at USC for every single thing he's ever learned in his life about film. And I thought that was interesting because, you get a lot of directors, well, I learned on my own, or I learned from, what's Quentin Tarantino's favorite quote is, I didn't learn movies from film school. I learned movies from movies.
Mhm.
As he said, he learned by watching movies.
I think that's a very valid study. I mean, I think you can learn that way too.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Carpenter's just been quoted in like 2 different of these biographies as saying film school taught him literally everything.
Right. Well, he did it the traditional way. I mean, as did all those people that went there before him or with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he went, he did it all. He edited, he filmed, he co-wrote, he wrote, he did the music for, and direct, but one of the things that I thought was interesting about 2 or 3 of the people, like Nick Castle, who went to school with him, a couple of the other graduates that went with him, said
Dan O'Bannon was in there too, I'm pretty sure.
Said that not only was John a gifted director, a gifted composer, but above all, he was a leader. He really knew how to communicate with actors as well as communicate with technicians and film crew and producers and go out and find money and do all these things. He was a great leader. We've talked about on the show several times different directors who use different methods. Cameron is so great technically, but he's not the best actor producer, our director that you can find. Other people like Spielberg that are a little bit of both, like Carpenter kind of thing. And then just so wrapping up, because he really became known because of a little film called Resurrection of Bronco Billy. Have you ever heard of this?
No, okay. I'm thinking Dark Star.
No, it was a USC student film. Wasn't directed by him, but he did the music for it. And he kind of co-edited it without taking any credit. It won an Academy Award for Best Short Film.
Wow.
And
he has an Academy Award.
With that encouragement, he's part of the group that did it. Right. But with that encouragement, that kind of gave him and Dan O'Bannon the oomph to go out and find a little bit of money, very little, to do their student film, which they called Dark Star.
Right.
Dark Star had the distinction of becoming one of the first student films that was then re-edited and released commercially. And was released as a commercial film. Have you ever seen Dark Star?
A long time ago.
We have got to put it on the list. We have got to do Dark Star.
I would remember it being that good.
Oh, it's not, but it would be fun to do.
The monster is like a basketball with
It's
feet.
A beach ball. It's a beach ball with great big claws on the bottom of it. Yeah. But it's also got an intelligent AI bomb that they have to try to defuse by literally talking to it.
Isn't Dan O'Bannon in it too?
Yes.
Doesn't he? I think he acts in it.
Not well, but he's in it. Yes. But it had a pretty good commercial success. It was actually very, it's what initially got the eye of the producer that ended up producing his next film, which was Assault on Precinct 13.
Nice.
And during that movie, he was interviewing people for script supervisor and interviewed a young lady named Deborah Hill. That's how he met her on Assault on Precinct 13. They became, of course, huge partners, not only romantically, but also she was his key producer for so many things.
Well, she was one of Hollywood's best known and popular female producers ever.
So good. Yeah. So good. And their next little thing together was a little thing that we've already covered called Halloween. Which I had never heard before. In this one bio I watched, he said, I really based Haddonfield on Bowling Green. That kind of rural, sort of small community where the houses are all together and everybody kind of knows each other. And
the name came from Deborah Hill's hometown of Haddonfield, New Jersey.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's kind of a combo there.
And it was interesting. They had Jamie Lee Curtis in this one bio, and she said, I'll never forget John talking to me. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he said, the more you spend at the beginning making it real, the environment real, the characters real. So these are real babysitters and they're gossiping and they're talking. And this is a real small coastal town or whatever. The more you spend making it real, the more horrific it will be when the horror starts. And that alone should be a thing for all horror and science fiction directors.
I'm not trying to bask in glory here, but I say that all the time. I
Yep.
say that who gives a fuck who the zombies kill if you don't like them?
Right.
You have to like the people and the characters. You have to build that reality, like he's saying, or you're not going to be upset when it gets dismantled or destroyed.
Yeah. Or you love to hate them. If they're a villainous character, make them like that. What's the one babysitter in Halloween that's always gossiping and talking and sleeping? All that
Annie.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
No. It's PJ Soul's character. I can't remember what.
Oh, yeah. But I thought that was a really great line for how you approach a film, because thinking about Halloween, then it had. And we'll get to our topic today because I got 2 more points.
Well, we're actually on our topic, and it is a Christmas episode, so I think we can.
True.
Bleed.
We're filling the stockings. Yeah. But anyway, but so Deborah Hill,
Linda was her name, not Annie.
Thanks for looking at it.
Is this your famous chewing Linda?
Deborah Hill said something in one of these bio interviews that we didn't even mention in Halloween, which she said John intentionally went from very wide. She talked about the set pieces. Halloween has basically 5 set pieces. It has the opening, it has the beginning, it has the establishment, it has the attack, and then it has the finale, then the ending. So 5 pieces.
Settings, you mean?
Well, what they call action pieces of the film. So sections of.
I thought you said sets. I was like,
they call them set pieces.
Okay.
J.J. Abrams goes from set piece to set piece to set piece, action event to action event to action event, kind of thing. Anyway, she said, if you'll notice in Halloween, John went intentionally after the opening, which is POV, one of the first times that POV had been used, the killer's POV, now a trope and a cliche. We talked about that when we did Halloween. But she said, from then on, Carpenter goes from a big widescreen sort of vista look. Everything is wide, looking down the street, looking at the school, the hallway, all this kind of, everything is wide until by the end of the movie, we're literally in a closet and we are tiny and it is framed really tightly. And I thought, that's interesting. We didn't discuss that, but that's true. He goes from these big vista roaming shots to really tight. I mean, and I even, in this bio, it's showing clips from Halloween, and he even clips off so you can see the closet door in the wall or even intruding on the frame. And she's really trapped there, kind of thing. I thought,
it's claustrophobic.
It's that claustrophobic kind of thing. And then Carpenter mentioned, for the shape, I intentionally only used him in the foreground and the background. So he would be far, far away, getting closer, or sitting up in the back, which everybody mentions that shot, or he suddenly blocks the frame and I do it with a stinger. And I did that to throw the audience off, showing that he could be anywhere. He could be right behind you, or he could be right in front of you.
The psychology of movie making.
Yeah. And he mentioned, last but not least, that there is no blood in Halloween intentionally.
Just in that beginning scene. Yeah.
That they didn't show blood.
We see it on the knife.
So I thought it was it was a great telling of his beginning and everything else. And it kind of brings us up to, after Halloween, he decided to do a gothic horror ghost story. And that's where we are today, which is kind of interesting.
1980s, The Fog.
The Fog, written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, right?
It was.
They both write it? Yeah.
They did. Okay. And, well, I guess I don't know if I should start off with a little bit of a synopsis and then, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, it opens up with an old seaman telling a ghost story by a campfire to a bunch of kids. And of course, this ghost story is going to play into the actual film story, where there's a 100-year-old shipwreck lying at the bottom of the sea of this peaceful California town called Antonio Bay. It turns out that the people, you know what? Let me just read this because I'm losing my. A strange supernatural occurrences blemish the festivities of the centennial of this town. A dense fog starts to shroud the surroundings, leading to unaccountable disappearances / murders. And it turns out that a century ago, a hideous crime was committed by the town's elders. They banished these lepers to sea, sank the ship, and now the restless dead have returned for revenge. And it's a classic ghost story, although it's really the first ghost story I remember as a kid where the ghosts seemed physical more than transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like The Shining. The Shining was one of those too, same year, where the ghosts actually look like real people or real monsters.
It's a great key. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this movie's one of my favorites, nostalgically speaking, has a wonderful cast. But I did want to talk a bit about your first encounter with it. What do you remember about the first time you saw this movie?
I don't have a lot of memory from the first time. I can't remember. I don't think I saw this in the theater. I might have. But I don't think I saw this in the theater.
Now, back when I saw it, I would not have known that it was the same director probably as Halloween. I can't remember if I did or not. But I was so impressed. I can't remember who I saw it with either. But I was so impressed with how good it was that I went back and saw it the following night.
Did you really?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm conflicted with this movie. I have a love-hate relationship with it, especially after watching it again now. I have not watched it in decades, kind of thing. I remember really liking it when it came out. I remember really liking the little twist end. I thought that last 10 seconds was kind of a really cool thing. I remembered loving Dean Cundey's work and the cinematography and all of that. And,
so lush.
And Adrienne Barbeau, I used to call her. That was my
You're
corny.
so sexist.
I am. Not really, but could be. Yeah, sort of. Maybe. Different generation. Anyway, but Adrienne Barbeau, I really liked her performance in it, everything else. Watching it again, all the plot holes really, 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 really bug me. But that's okay because, again, it's kind of like, what was the movie we did recently where we both said we really wanted to like it, but we didn't?
Event Horizon.
Yeah, it could have been, but wasn't. Mm-hmm. This isn't that. This is still great, still good for what it is, but doesn't hold up if you think about it. So this is one of those, I guess this is more of a, check your stuff at the door and just go with the ride of the ghost story.
It's a very moody visual piece.
And I think it doesn't
the scares come from that, I think.
Yes, definitely. It's I think it's all due to Carpenter and Dean Cundey, not necessarily anybody's performance in this as far as that goes or anything else. It's their pacing, their lighting, their mood piece. It's much more of a mood, like I think you said it perfect. It's much more of a mood piece. Mm-hmm. But I also think I didn't know until doing research for this podcast that it had a lot of production trouble. Like basically they put a cut together, looked at it, and Carpenter literally said, "This is terrible." And
they remade it.
And they spent another month remaking the movie. I mean, filming entire scenes that were never in the script to begin with.
They did.
And all of this. So do we want to talk about that? Like the production?
We can, but while I'm leaning over this microphone, I just want to go, this is KAB Radio 1340.
Well, I'm starting with that. I mean, come on. So yeah.
Well, did you happen to catch the commentary that I sent you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if you did, and I sent you a documentary as well. Yeah. I mean, basically, John Carpenter wanted to make a traditional ghost story, and he said that when they previewed it, it was a little too short. And when they previewed it, what I mean by ghost story is not jump scares, not blood and guts, not that kind of movie. And so it was more moody and less, I don't know, physical, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Assaultive, kind of less violent almost.
Less
but
violent.
Even though this was violent.
Yes. And it tanked with rehearsal audiences, whatever you call those, preview audiences.
Previews. Yeah.
And he said something in the commentary that made me think, wow, we talk about this all the time. The audience for that time period was wanting something more. They were wanting what, Halloween gave or what Friday the 13th gave. And we say that now when we do a really good mood piece like The Innocents from Jack Clayton in the 60s, we talk about how that will not play well with today's audience because they're looking for, the next Hostel or whatever.
Right. Saw.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have to look at these films in context. Now, I do love the fact that, like you said in your introduction, Carpenter is such a working director. He knew what was wrong with it and how to fix it.
Yes.
So he went back and shot lengthier scenes to cut in, jump scares to cut in. He put the whole opening with John Houseman in, telling the ghost story to the kids, and a little bit of gore with like the zombies looking ghost type stuff.
Well, they mention it. They don't mention it in the commentary so much, but it's in, there's several, you can find retrospectives of The Fog out there on YouTube, everywhere, on other podcasts, everything else. You hear, and they were influenced by Scanners because Scanners has suddenly had the whole head blowing up and audiences wanted that now. And that's what we need. But when I started thinking about it, I was going, okay, so according to my research, they added John Houseman's telling the story around the campfire,
which is great
setup, great atmosphere, great opening, one of my favorites. Excellent. They added all of the murders on the boat, the 3 fishermen that are murdered on the boat. They added the tap on the door where the leper the ghost almost kills Tommy Lee Wallace or whomever.
The shadow outside the French door. Yeah.
And they added the attack on the lighthouse. So I sat and watched it this time and went, so what was the first movie like? Because those are 4 of the biggest elements of this movie.
Well, I also read that it was too short and he had to add stuff. So he must have cut stuff from the original too.
He had to have, because they also said, the killing the weatherman, the close, basically, I think Tommy Lee Wallace said, if anything that's an intense close-up was added later. So the maggots on the face, the whole attack hook to the neck, all these close-ups, he said all of that was added.
The sword coming through the guy on the boat, which is so set up. Every time I watch it, I'm like, oh, that doesn't look good.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. But yeah, it was so, and also a little bit of trivia that I had, he wanted to do a ghost story also because he and Deborah, who were dating at the time, were at literally Stonehenge.
They weren't dating. He was married to Adrienne Barbeau.
Oh, yeah.
They may have dated before Halloween. I don't know.
Yes. Well, they were dating and everything else. They're
just friends now, but yeah.
Well, they had recently, what I had heard, now correct me if I'm wrong.
She's dead, but they were friends post-relationship.
What I had heard, and this is in one of the biographies I watched or behind the scenes I watched, was they were on vacation together as a couple at Stonehenge. And a fog bank was way on the horizon, like moving toward them. And John, trying to scare her, said, what do you think's in that fog? And she immediately replied, ghosts. And he goes, that'd make a good story. Let's do that. So they started working on it together.
Yeah.
She also said that when she was writing the dialogue, which she still likes a lot at this interview time, when they interviewed her, she said, I really like Stevie Wayne's dialogue. I think it's one of the best roles Adrienne's ever had. And she said, but while she was writing it, they were on their honeymoon. Adrienne Barbeau and John Carpenter were on their honeymoon. It was like 2 months before shooting. And Jamie Lee Curtis is quoted as saying, what she remembers most about The Fog was how hurt Deborah Hill was the entire production, because she was still trying to handle the marriage. and everything.
I did not realize. See, they must have dated like around Halloween time and then broke up, and he married Adrienne Barbeau before The Fog.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, supposedly that's when, they actually started their relationship just after Assault on Precinct 13 came out.
Okay.
So all through Halloween, they were dating all up until right before Fog entered principal photography. And so Jamie Lee Curtis says, she goes, I was more influenced by taking care of my friend Deborah than I was with the rest of that
so
movie.
Sad.
I know.
But I mean, and then I watched, commentary and listened to commentary with them. And it was done in 2002, when the DVD special edition came out or whatever. And they seemed like friends. I mean, obviously.
Yeah. They obviously developed a relationship together.
Friendship afterwards.
All three of them. Adrienne Barbeau, in this one interview I read, she said the first day they drove out to the lighthouse and they were filming and everything else. But she said, John and I took separate cars and we didn't eat lunch together. And we were very professional. It was very awesome. And we got back home that night and went, well, that was no fun at all. I don't want to do that anymore. So we just said, no, we're married and we're going to act like a married couple. And again, that affected Deborah.
Right.
She went on to produce more of his films.
That's what I was going to get to, because I looked that up. I was wondering about that. And she only did the next one. She did Escape from New York.
Right.
And then she stopped when he did The Thing. And she really didn't come back until things started resurfacing, like the remake of The Fog and the sequel to Escape from New York. That's when she kind of came back.
And Adrienne's in Escape from New York too.
Yeah.
Maybe she needed some time.
The Thing was a perfect one to break off of, because that's predominantly a man-driven movie anyway. There's not a lot of women in that movie.
True, that would have been it. Yeah, true.
So, but I did look at. I mean, she produced so many other things. I mean, she didn't have to just be in bed with John Carpenter.
No,
I mean, she was very well respected. I wanted to say one other thing before we get into some scenes of this movie.
Yeah.
And it's something you brought up when we talked about how bad In the Mouth of Madness is last week. And we were like, where is the magic? What happened to John Carpenter, who was so good in the beginning?
Yep.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it was the combination of him, Deborah Hill, and Dean Cundey, because this movie is beautiful. The Thing may have not had Deborah Hill, but it had Cundey.
Well, and it also had Rob Bottin. So that's what really worked with The Thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So
but it's Dean and John and Deborah, I think are yes.
Collaboration.
So right. Yeah.
And I mean, because I hate it, because when you said you had John Carpenter news at the beginning of this, I was thinking, oh, he's going to tell about a new movie coming out or something. I was like, who cares? Because I haven't liked any of his movies in so long. Mm-hmm. And it sucks.
Well, and I think so much of it was, and again, it's ironic because this came up in one of the retrospectives I listened to. They said that what John, kind of like the film school one, he was a great leader. One of the things they said was John always knew what he wanted, but he also knew how much value you could give to it. Yeah. So whether you were the grip, the gaffer, Dean Cundey, Adrienne, whomever, Deborah, he knew your skill set and said, this is what I want. How can you, I know you can do this for me, kind of thing. Hence, look at Rob Bottin on The Thing. I mean, going from The Fog to The Thing was pretty amazing from a effects standpoint.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned Rob Bottin. We talked about how he made two different versions of this movie. Well, Rob Bottin had to step in as Blake, the ghost, because he wanted somebody really tall to play that part. Yeah. However, he used Tommy Lee Wallace as sort of a stunt ghost in every gore scene where somebody's getting killed or whatever. So the two primary ghosts in this movie are Tommy Lee Wallace, who worked with Carpenter for years and was married to Nancy Keys at the time, who played Annie in Halloween and is also the Janet Leigh's assistant in this one. I can't remember her name. Yeah. And Rob Bottin. So those two are prominent in this film as well, even though you won't recognize them.
And we mentioned Dean Cundey, and we can't, when we did the thing, we talked about it too, but you cannot say enough about Dean Cundey and his visualizations, because a lot of people think, oh, John Carpenter, Dean Cundey, but also Cundey is still working now.
Yeah.
And I mean, but he did, those of you who are non-genre, whatever. I mean, Romancing the Stone, all the Back to the Futures,
Jurassic
Hook,
Park,
yeah,
Apollo 13, Roger Rabbit. Yeah.
He's done so many movies, and they all have this incredible visual presence to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's
what I was going to say. He, like Deborah Hill, I mean, maybe the problem is with Carpenter, because he and Deborah Hill went on and became even more famous, and John Carpenter just kind of stuck in this niche. So I don't know.
Well, I think John went through, based on some bios, like I said, I delved kind of quite extensively into his bio in general. And I think he went through, that arrogant period. The same thing that happened to John Milius and a couple others, the Hitchcock wannabe, Brian De Palma. They end up going through this "I am God's creation" phase kind of thing, and and it ends up hurting their art, because they're not willing to learn anymore, and they're not willing to push themselves. They say, "This is what I do it better than anybody, and I'm the best."
I phone it in.
Yeah, and you end up doing body bags or Escape from LA, So, but okay, so that being said, there are some incredible scenes in this movie, basically due to Dean Cundey and
the fact that even though it was one of the lowest budgets he ever had, it was shot in anamorphic widescreen, and it looks lush and beautiful. It is so big. It's like a Hitchcock film, and it's not expensive at all.
No,
I was amazed.
And some of the effects work they did was amazing too, because you didn't have a lot just of the fog. You didn't have a lot of CGI at the time, so they literally built blackout miniatures of like the city, like the street, and they would have these things in black drape shrouded, and they would pump the fog into it, and it would go around that black shape, which is where the building is in the shot. So that kind of forced perspective or effect lighting and effect photography was really cool and works really well. The fog is a presence in this movie. It's not as big a presence as I think it should be, or make as much sense as I think it should be from a dramaturg's perspective, but it's definitely visually compelling in this entire movie. From the guy seeing it on the horizon to Stevie Wayne looking out and seeing it slowly go to the coastline. I mean, it's really good.
There ain't no fog bank out there. Hey, there's a fog bank out there.
There's a fog bank out there.
Okay. Scenes. I love the montage scene at the beginning where things are going weird and there's no people. It's just objects or places.
Yeah. The only people is the dude in the convenience store.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. When the gas station lights flicker and the gas pump thing flies off and starts releasing gas and the bell dings.
Yeah.
All the cars, lights come on and the horns blast, all that stuff. I eat that shit up. I'm like, what the fuck's going on? This is crazy. I got to get to the bottom of this. You get right drawn into that mystery.
Love it. This time watching it, it bothered me just because then what's the purpose of the fog? If they can do all this without the fog, why do they need the fog? Kind of thing. So I was really struggling with, it kind of defeats the purpose of the fog being creepy and scary, and that's where the power comes from.
I just thought it was I just thought things went askew when they were present.
But are they present?
They take care of that in a later scene, with that scene where Tom, what's his face? I can't remember the characters' names. He played Nick Castle, Tom Atkins. When he gets up to go to the door and there's somebody standing in the shadow, and then you see the clock strike midnight or go past midnight or no, 1 o'clock and the
Strikes
witching
1 o'clock.
hours. It strikes 1 o'clock. The witching hour is over. He goes to the door and everything's gone. And the clock shatters. Isn't that the one that shatters? I think it is.
Yep.
I think that just, I felt like it was the weirdness, almost an interdimensional weirdness, just an odd thing that's going on with the presence of them. Like disruption in our norm.
Right. Which I would buy if it was all in one night. And it was the anniversary. And they were
And
coming,
it was 2 nights.
And that was it.
Yeah.
But it's 2 nights. And
I
it
can live
doesn't
with
work
that.
for me. Okay. Yeah.
I
Like
mean,
I said,
what
a
if
lot
they
of this-
sentenced them one night and then shipped them out the second, you know? So the 100 years would be those 2 days. I don't know.
Right. No.
It doesn't bother me. So,
I know a lot of my nitpicks will not bother you. I know. And they don't really bother me. I mean, I can still appreciate the movie and like it. And I do agree. I think that whole opening montage is great.
Yeah.
I think the lighthouse montage is great. The setup of it works, you know, even going down this, her driving the coastline. So we see how remote and far off this is.
Yeah.
And then that great location, which is actually in California, of going down all of those steps to get to the lighthouse and everything. I thought that was a cool scene too. It doesn't mean that it's a bad movie. It just means the movie, you know, needs a rewrite and it would be great. Kind of
Well,
thing.
I think they redid it and it was worse. So
Yeah, I heard it. I haven't seen the sequel, but I heard the sequel.
you know,
terrible.
I've seen it and I don't remember it. So
Oh, it was that
tells
good.
you right there.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. What other scenes stick out to you then?
Any
You
scene
give
with
me a
the
good
theme
scene.
song, because it's great. The theme to this is another Carpenter great. I love the theme song.
Well, it opens up with
Um,
that quote from Edgar Allan Poe and the music playing behind it.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's beautiful.
But we already mentioned it. I love the John Houseman add-on opening. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's great, telling the story and everything else. I like, and it's just I have to go back on what I said earlier, because I said none of the performances really highlight this movie. Hal Holbrook is really good in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And his scene where he's telling the history is a great scene. Even showing Janet Leigh, I don't remember her character name, sorry, but Janet Leigh's kind of skepticism,
Kathy
but
Williams is her name.
I'm giving in to you kind of thing. And the other girl who played Annie, I don't know who
Nancy
she played in
Keys.
this. She plays somebody in this, but she was
She plays Sandy in this. She's Kathy's assistant.
right. But you know, she's obviously not buying it and going, "Oh my God," get to the end of the story and rolling her eyes and that kind of thing.
It's the same character from Halloween.
Yeah.
It's the exact same character. But I
Yes.
like it. She plays
It
a
is.
bitch really good.
It's her, and this is her first job after she left, after she survived Haddonfield.
Right, exactly.
In an alternate reality. Yeah. But yeah, so I liked that scene with Hal Holbrook. Again, I've mentioned I like the very, very capper stinger ending, although it is kind of cruel to an audience, but it's cool.
I'll be honest with you. I think that Tom Atkins and Jamie Lee Curtis as Nick and Elizabeth are awesome. And the reason I like them is because they are so natural and underplayed. I mean, it's like, yeah, we met, I picked her up on the road. We slept together. She's kind of hanging out with me for a while. It's like so
It's the
underplayed.
80s,
Yeah.
you know?
I was like, this is great. They are really good at this because they're not overplaying it. And Jamie Lee Curtis had just come off a superstardom with Halloween. She could have been a diva and she's not because her mother is not, you know, and her mother taught her probably what she needed to do. But anyway, I just think they're great in it. But yeah, you're right. Hal Holbrook is the grab. He's the main reason this movie works.
From an acting perspective. I also think Adrienne Barbeau is great in this. I think
So
Tommy,
good.
and I love her and the Weatherman's kind of their chemistry too. Like you said, it's very natural and it doesn't feel, you know, he's obviously flirting with her and she's obviously liking it, but also saying, you know, no, not going to work.
I've got my son. I'm not worried about hopping in bed with you.
Didn't like that. Didn't like the son and the nanny, grandmother, whomever, yada yada, the victim. For no
that
reason.
didn't bother me.
Well, I have a huge thing with the victims. I don't understand why Blake and his men are picking these people, because there's no generational relationship. If it's vengeance and we're mad at the elders for killing us, then why not kill elder descendants? Well, instead you just
maybe
kill
they are. We just don't know it.
Well, then we need to know it. That needs to be part of. Needs to be part of. And see, and I think in my rewrite that would be part of it. The fishermen at the beginning get killed, but then we find out, oh wait, you don't know this, but that boat and that captain is the grandson of so and so, who was one of the elders.
Yeah.
You know, and do that scene instead of the hospital scene, which I don't like in this movie. I think the hospital scene is terrible.
That was added. That was added for the modern audience.
Yeah, and that doesn't work at all, and also leads to one of my other watch notes, which is, why are the ghosts warning people? Why is he scratching 3, and why is the wood saying 6 must die? Why are we giving warnings? You know, makes no sense. But anyway, scenes. Oh, I will always remember it because it burned and imprinted. Again, a Carpenter. Well, it's all 3, I guess. Carpenter, Kundi, and Rob Bottin. When Father, whomever he is, first sees Blake in the church with his men.
Right.
That is an awesome shot.
Yeah.
With the fog just at waist level, and you're just seeing them in silhouette, and the fog is kind of glowing a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know how Dean lit that shit, but it's amazing.
It looks great.
Yeah.
And just the 2 red eyes of Blake. I mean, we never see Blake's features.
And you know, that's not an optical. That Rob Bottin had like something in his mask that did that.
Yeah, he had like little LEDs or some kind of flashlight.
Some kind of red light was in the eye holes of that mask or whatever it was he had on. Yeah.
Yeah, I said LED. In the 80s, there were no LEDs.
No LEDs. I think, well, first of all, the thing that sticks out to me the most in this movie, and it kind of sticks out in what we were talking about in other movies, is that tension and build with the music, the doom, doom,
oh yeah,
and like when Jamie Lee Curtis and Tom Atkins are driving through town in the pickup truck with the boy, and they run into the town, and you see the fog is coming, and they have to back up.
Oh yeah,
or like when they're all getting at the church, and you see the fog is creeping up the pathway toward the church.
Yeah.
Or when Adrienne Barbeau is up in the lighthouse, and she sees that now it's coming after her, and over the hill and down the steps. All of that tension building, and the music just works for me. It's his editing or something.
It is. It's the photography, it's his editing, it's the music. And because the fog does become a presence in this. Mm-hmm. It's, one of my keys is it's the blob.
I've got that too.
It is.
That's
it really is. Because
the shots of it like coming over the hill reminded me of the way they made the blob move. And I was like, oh, they're doing that same technique. Okay.
Yeah. I do think, though, I mean, from, a storytelling perspective, I do think it's weird that they split up the action at the end. It seems odd that they isolate Stevie Wayne
mm-hmm.
way over here in her lighthouse, and they isolate the rest of the cast in the church. Seems like she should have been at the church by then.
It does seem like they would have got them together, but they wanted her to be the voice. And it's odd because in this movie that was Adrienne Barbeau's cinematic debut, she is only in a scene with her son and only in a scene fighting for her life on top of a lighthouse. And that's it. She has no other scenes with people. She's always by herself.
Right. It's basically like her, John and her directed her by herself or whatever.
Yeah. It was weird. But I did think she does a great job though.
She does, but I do think that kind of split our narrative at the end there, and it didn't, to me, add to the tension. It kind of took away from it because suddenly I'm worried about, okay, there's obviously these 3 guys have already clawed her into little pieces by the time he picks up the cross and walks out there to Blake. I mean, if that's happening at the same time, there's no, or vice versa. I was going, okay, they haven't already broken in all these windows. They already had them broken out before we cut to Stevie climbing up the ladder. So I kind of lost. Again, I think it's because he was under such pressure to rework this movie and get it where it needed to be. But I wonder, if he says he added all the Stevie Wayne at the lighthouse at the end part, what was her original storyline? What happened to her in the real movie?
Just probably giving directions about the fog, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't
But
know.
yeah, the stuff at the lighthouse I think is good. I like. It always bothered me that they were on top of that metal roof that was slanted. I was like, "Girl, you were gonna fall a long way."
good suspense there with that was a bad choice.
Did you see where on the commentary where Deborah Hill goes, "That's my hand and those are my legs"?
Yes. Yeah,
because it was her up there doing the stunt double work. You know, they still did this on the cheap. I mean, they had to, fill in. There was a scene at a party where she was naming people in the background, including herself. The celebration, the centennial thing.
Oh yeah, and they were at Adrienne or Stevie Wayne's house. She was going, "That's my lamp. I still have that
and
lamp."
That picture of me is that's a picture
of me. Yeah. And all that. And I thought it was interesting because it immediately reminded me of she's also the hand in Halloween in the beginning.
She
picks
is.
Up the knife,
yeah. That's funny.
So Deborah's a stunt double in all of his movies, kind of thing. I have some huge holes with it. Like I said, why are the ghosts warning people? How do ghosts from 100 years ago know that they should cut the phone lines? That makes no sense.
That was a weird. That is really stupid. The way it's almost the way it's inserted into that scene. It's like, oh yeah, that's crazy. The fog creeping up the pole and snapping the wires. I was like, let's stop them from talking to each other.
Yeah, yeah. And I was going, what do the pirates want overall? If it's just vengeance against the town, why are you killing fishermen and weatherman? Yeah, and some grandma? Why does that work?
Because Mrs. Coberts is evil.
I don't know. Sure, obviously.
Her ancestor was the judge.
See, that would work for me, but we don't know. It's just like my grandpa said when he condemned those lepers. I do love that story, though. I love the story. I like the opening with him just saying it was a shipwreck. But then when Holbrook gets into the story, and it was Blake, gave the town had all this money that he was going to give to the town if they just let his colony be here, but they couldn't let that happen. No, not lepers, everything else, which also bodes a pet peeve of mine. Like I said, I listened to a bunch of retrospectives and reviews of The Fog, and 9 times out of 10, people call them pirates. They're not freaking pirates. The Fog has nothing to do with pirates.
No, they do use some swords. That may be confusing, though.
But so did sailors. That was they are leprous.
So did leper sailors.
They are leprous sailors, which is actually grosser than pirates. Kind of thing. But okay, so my final big kind of story thing is they build up this whole thing, and he builds up this whole thing of they lured them to the rocks. The ship crashed. Blake and all of his men were killed. They plundered the wreckage and got all the gold, and that's what they used to establish the town. Right? So why did they take all the gold, melt it into a big gold cross, and put it in the wall of the church? Where did the gold come from? What? That makes no sense.
Because it happened a century or 50 years later when someone was feeling guilty about it and decided, you know what, I'm just going to put this shit away so it doesn't curse
Boy,
us.
you are writing a lot into this movie. You need to.
I need to write the script.
What the hell? I was going.
Some shit started happening on the 50th anniversary, and some guy said, we need to get rid of this.
We need to
just melt it all, put it in a cross and seal it in the wall.
And this journal bugs me too, so it's going up there. Yeah.
That way, if anyone ever has trouble, they'll know what's going on.
Yeah, we'll be able to have a blueprint to everything. Yeah. No, So indulge me just for a minute. So because my last watch note is this movie is atmosphere over everything, which is a good point, but also a bad point from a storytelling angle. Okay. So because you're a writer and you're a great writer, and I see what you think of this. So I just threw this together because I've been doing a bunch of dramaturg with theater stuff lately. And I thought, hey, I'll just play it here. So it's got like 6 points. One is it should take place in one night. This whole movie should take place in one night because it's the 100th anniversary and they're back. It can still start with all the supernatural stuff, even prior to them getting there. Tie that in with the fisherman. So it's happening at the same time. It's kind of like their influence taking over the town. Elizabeth, who is the Jamie Lee Curtis character, needs a point. There's really no point to her character. She's just a hitchhiker. She comes into town. She sleeps with a guy, blah, blah, blah. And then she just is along for the ride the whole time. She gets to find the body, whatever.
She gets grabbed through the window too. Yeah.
Right. But my thought is maybe she is the granddaughter of Blake, of his wife. And she doesn't, and she was drawn here. She doesn't know why. Maybe she's having like dreams of ships or something or whatever. She never really knew her mother because her mother died in childbirth, that kind of thing. But give her a backstory and make her the focal point. And that could also lead up to a climax where are we going to kill her or not? Because she is the direct descendant of Blake. And that could be really cool. Blake should take his revenge on 5 people that were actually involved. They should actually be direct descendants, and we should know that somehow. Maybe the female mayor, the priest, the commissioner, one of the fishermen, lighthouse lady. Lighthouse lady needs to be related. It's her uncle or whatever. I've got maybe one family is dead, so they have to sacrifice someone. So you know what I mean? Maybe if this was a novel, you would reach a point where he's here for the descendants. Well, the descendant of the mayor died off, like his son died. So there is no mayor descendant. So, okay, well then somebody has to be sacrificed. And we get a Miss Carmody saying, we'll sacrifice the boy, or whatever. But so I've got maybe one of the family is dead. What if the grandfather priest objected and didn't agree with them? The town leaders do it anyway. So at the end, his grandson has to sacrifice himself. The Hal Holbrook character has to sacrifice himself for the town leader whose family died out. So he makes the sacrifice to Blake rather than the kind of jump scare ending, which is, Blake appears. And it might be neat to see if the deaths were different and not all just cut up people. Maybe actually one person dies from leprosy. So that would be kind of gross and awful and cool. So those
all
are my
that
thoughts.
exposition is going to take away from the atmosphere.
Art, the art that's flowing over you. Yeah. Okay. No, because we could do without the hospital scene. We could cut down a little bit on the weatherman scene, and we could add all this in there, and it'd be great. Anyway, just my thoughts there.
Okay.
It's still good. I'm still not saying it's not good. I like it. I'm just saying, could be better.
Let's go to casting.
Okay.
I have a lot on casting, so beware.
Cool. All right.
Actually, it's not a lot. I'm sorry. It's a good bit though. I have a lot on the next movie. I forgot I've already prepared for the next movie, and it's a lot. This one, Adrienne Barbeau is the lead. She was, of course, married to John Carpenter at the time. She was only known for television roles. This was her cinematic debut.
Yeah.
And she modeled the character after Alison Steele, who was a real female disc jockey known as the Nightbird. And I went on YouTube and played some clips of Miss Steele as the Nightbird. And I'm amazed at how much she sounds, Adrienne, that is, sounds like her. It's like she is really mimicking this woman who was really popular back in the 60s and 70s. I can't remember when it was.
Well, because she called her her line is the night light. Isn't that what it is?
Oh, I can't remember.
She goes, "This is Stevie Wayne, your nightlight." Yeah. So yeah.
KAB Radio 1340.
I love the fact that she's listening to promos on the cassette tape and all the different styles they use. That was really cool.
That was cool.
I like that.
Yeah, it's something that we do sometimes.
Yes. Sometimes you have to.
Anything else on Adrienne? The only thing I also had mentioned that she, even though she's the lead in the movie, really she has only scenes with her son and some ghosts, and that's it. No one else.
No one else. Nope.
Jamie Lee Curtis, ironically enough, I don't have anything on her, probably because of what you said, the fact that she's irrelevant. in this movie, but
She is.
maybe he cast her because they could get her mom. I don't know. She was a big hit in Halloween. He wanted to work with her again. He wrote the role for her.
I have the answer for that.
What's that?
He actually called her up when they were writing it and asked her, and she had only gotten a Love Boat episode and one other television episode where she played a lesbian tennis player, she said, after Halloween. And John
in
thought
the 70s? I'm shocked.
John thought her career would be through the roof, and she had gotten 2 television parts in all the time since Halloween. And he said, okay, well, then I will, I'm writing a part for you and I want to put you in it.
And your mom.
And after that is when she became, the Scream Queen, Terror Train.
Well, she does have a good scream in this when that body falls on her. I noticed that.
Which was an edit, I found out. It wasn't really there at the beginning.
No, I actually saw the deleted scene, the one that didn't
okay.
work. Yeah.
Okay.
There's one that didn't work, and it looked a lot like the one from Halloween where
it falls down.
No, no, not the trapeze thing. The one where the cabinet door opens and Annie's slumped in the closet or whatever, the cabinet or whatever that is.
Uh-huh.
It was the same thing with Jamie Lee Curtis opening a cabinet and like the eyeless man being slumped in there. It just wasn't scary.
Okay.
So they ended up changing it to what we now know as the jump scare.
Well, there you go.
But anyway, so yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis is in this movie. I mentioned her mother is also in it. Janet Leigh, of course, we know her from being stabbed in a shower in Psycho. So we have actually done another film with Miss Lee, wonderful actress of the 50s and 60s.
Yes.
John Houseman was another get for this movie. You mentioned Hal Holbrook being so powerful, but John Houseman steals the scene, the only scene that he has. He plays a character named Mr. Mackin. There's a key in that name. There's a key in a lot of names, if you haven't noticed yet.
Yes.
That Tom Atkins' character's name's Nick Castle, who is the friend of John Carpenter that played the Shape in Halloween. Well, Mr. Mackin, played by John Houseman, is a reference to Arthur Mackin, the Welsh author of ghost stories, very well known from the 1890s.
Okay.
I was trying to think of what else he was. There was several ghost writers out of the UK around that period, and he was one of them.
Okay.
Tom Atkins played, like I said, Nick Castle, who was the friend of John Carpenter that he still works with John Carpenter. He actually wrote Escape from New York. Didn't we say that? I think we did.
Mm-hmm.
I think he wrote it. Charles Cyphers plays the weatherman. You would recognize him as Annie's father, the cop that pulls them over in Halloween when they are smoking pot.
Yep.
I like him. I think he's a very underrated character actor. He is in a lot of things.
Agreed.
And his character, do you know what his character's name was?
No.
The weatherman's name is Dan O'Bannon.
Oh, yeah. She does call him Dan. I remember that a couple of times. Hey, Dan.
Yeah. So I mentioned Nancy Keys, who played Annie from Halloween. She plays Sandy, Kathy's assistant in this movie. She's billed as Nancy Loomis. That's where Carpenter got the name Loomis for Sam Loomis in the original Halloween.
Yeah.
However, she was married to Tommy Lee Wallace at the time. So that's why her name is Keys now and not Loomis or Wallace, I guess.
Okay.
But she was married to Tommy Lee Wallace, which is why she ended up in some Carpenter movies. I think she may be in Assault on 13 too. Assault on Precinct 13. I can't remember.
Is.
Okay.
Yep, she is.
Oh, you know what? Yes, I have it in my notes. She has been in 5 John Carpenter movies: Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 3, and this. So, however, Halloween 2 and 3 really aren't John Carpenter movies. I think he just produced them. And then lastly, well, not lastly, but the last prominent cast member is Hal Holbrook, who had the role of Father Malone. Mm-hmm. Someone else was offered this role and couldn't do it. You want to take a wild stab at that?
Charlton Heston. No, I don't know.
No. Christopher Lee.
Ooh,
Yeah. He would have been British, which would have been interesting, but
didn't he want him to be in something else too? There was something else that Carpenter wanted Christopher Lee to play, and he couldn't.
everybody
Can't
wants
remember
Christopher
what.
Lee to be in their movie.
Saruman.
So anyway, Lee proved unavailable, and Hal Holbrook was eventually cast. Although I think he took up a large chunk of their budget, and they only had him for a day or two, so they had to shoot all his scenes together, which is not uncommon in the film business.
Yeah.
Okay, other weird casting things. I've already mentioned that Blake was played by Rob Bottin. What do I have here? Oh, he is 6'5". That's why he wanted him, because he is a very tall man.
Yeah.
The name of the coroner in that scene you don't like, with the ghost sitting up on the table and going after Jamie. Do you know what
it's
that?
It's not a ghost; it's a victim possessed by a ghost.
Oh yeah, you're right. It is a victim. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's one of the fishermen.
Yeah, it's the dead eyeless fisherman. Do you know what the name of the coroner was?
No.
Dr. Phibes. Tell me that's not intentional.
Yeah.
Yes. A little tease to the character Vincent Price played in movies that we covered this season: The Abominable Dr. Phibes and Dr. Phibes Rises Again.
Yeah.
I have in here as a just off key note, Kurt Russell was offered a role. What that role was, I have no idea. It just was there on IMDb, and I was like, well, that makes sense, because he had already done the movie with Carpenter, the Elvis movie.
Right.
But he had not done Escape from New York or The Thing yet, which were the next two films. So
yep. That's what was ramping up.
Lastly, one of the best, most Academy Award worthy scenes in this movie comes from John Carpenter himself as the janitor.
Yeah.
In the scene with Father Malone.
Father, can I get paid?
Why don't you come in at 6 instead tomorrow? Okay. It is terrible. And he even admitted it on the commentary that I watched, where he was like, this is the worst acting ever, and I never did another movie or something.
Yeah, he basically said, here I am and I suck.
Yeah, he is really bad in that scene. But Hal Holbrook looks great. Of course, Hal Holbrook would look great anyway. Awards. This film was not up for many. However, there are some I will mention. The Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films nominated it for Best Horror Film of 1980, and nominated it for Best Special Effects. It did not win either. And then I've mentioned this film festival before. It's called the Avoriaz. And the reason I bring it up is that John and Deborah mentioned it on their commentary. So I'm assuming him and Deborah went to this awards thing.
Good.
It is a fantastic film festival in France that ran from 1973 to 1993. And then the predecessor is called the Gérard Damer International Fantasy. So it went on to become something else, but it used to be called the Avoriaz, and John Carpenter won the Critics Award for the movie and was he was nominated for the grand prize and did not win it. But so I'm assuming him and Deborah went because he won.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting to me. And this movie, as are many on this podcast season's list, is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die.
Well,
which
there you go.
I understand. I mean, it's not the big deal. So
yeah, I can somewhat understand that. It is good though. And it's a good ride, and it's very well told tension, I think.
And nostalgically speaking, I can just sit down and watch this movie like, I don't know, comfort
like
food.
I do Deadly Mantis.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
So any other trivia before we want to move on to keys?
Let me check my notes real quick just for trivia.
I've got one thing that I think we've already said, that the rough cut was only 80 minutes. and he added more scenes, including the ghost story scene. That's the only trivia really that I had.
Nope, I don't have any trivia.
I have a lot of keys, a lot that are out of my own head, and I have a lot that I lifted from IMDb. Do you want to start, or do you want me to?
Well, if you have a lot, you start.
Okay. Halloween. I mean, obviously, Halloween was the film he directed before this, but I see a lot of Halloween in this film, especially at the end where he does those shots of locations consecutively where bad stuff happened. He does the exact same technique in Halloween. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like you see the house where the fog was, you see the church on the hill, you see the lighthouse. In this, you see, where Annie was babysitting, where, Lori was babysitting, upstairs in the bedroom, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that was a stroke of genius in Halloween. I mean, I didn't mention it earlier, but one of the 5 set pieces I think of Halloween is that ending, which he really did just based on little set up tags and tails of shots that he already had, but he put that montage together with the music, and suddenly the shape is anywhere. It is out there alive somewhere. And it's great, brilliant. But yeah, I could see that as a key. Yes.
Well, and that leads into my next key. We know that Carpenter is a Howard Hawks fan, big time. The director Howard Hawks, and he was inspired by The Thing from Another World to make his own version of The Thing. Well, this movie is like The Thing from Another World, where you have Stevie Wayne at the end warning people to beware of the fog, which is
that one.
Basically the whole watch the skies speech. And that is part of what we hear when they're showing that montage of clips of places we, encountered the fog earlier in the film.
Keep watching the sky.
So it's almost a dual key with The Thing and Halloween.
Well, I also think in the DVD commentary, he mentions that she was inspired by Howard Hawks's femme fatales. Even that's why he even made her smoke, even though Adrienne Barbeau doesn't smoke.
Yes, that's right. So, he did say that.
Yeah. I've got, of course, you can't say it didn't, key references to it, but also references that it made, the remake. There was a remake in 2005. Neither of us have seen it. Got bad reviews. Not really wanting to see it. I had said earlier, one of the inspirations for this was that trip to Stonehenge where they saw the fog bank. He also said another inspiration was what was originally called in England the Tollenberg Terror, but became the Crawling Eye in America because it was a radioactive mist that created tentacle monsters with one giant eye. It's a science fiction movie, one of the monster movies of the 50s. He said it was a big influence to him because of the fact that you could get scared when you saw mist or fog. So
I saw that and I immediately went to our list to see if the Crawling Eye was on it, and it is.
Yeah.
We just haven't got to it yet.
Of course it is. You had said Dr. Phibes, but that's just one of all the names. All these names are references and influences. It's based on an actual incident, so to speak, that took place in Gillette, California, of a shipwreck that was caused by, not intentional, but the ship spotted a beach campfire that they thought was their signal fire for the port. And so they went to the wrong location and created the shipwreck. And that Carpenter said that was a direct inspiration for this movie. I've got one you'll like. Play Misty for me. Because of, again, that DJ kind of talking you through, and there's something horrific and horrible out there.
Well, right, she's basically the female version of the Clint Eastwood character of the late night DJ that talks real soft into the microphone.
Yeah,
and
just spending the night with you.
I love that movie. I would put that movie on our list, but it's not really a horror movie. It's oh my God, though. Adrian Lyne stole it for Fatal Attraction, and the original Play Misty for Me is so much better.
Yes, agreed. So good. That was a good bunch of good key references right there.
Yeah.
Carpenter has said one of his inspirations for this was Val Lewton. So again,
not surprising with the lighting. The lighting's beautiful. It's just in color, so it's different.
well, Isle of the Dead, I Walked with the Zombie, all those.
But those are black and white. That's what I'm saying. This
Correct.
is yeah.
But their pacing and that tonal quality of the ramping up the suspense all the time was what he said.
Yeah.
You could be afraid in Val Lewton. He even said, I think in one of the docus I saw, he said, you could be afraid in a Val Lewton movie with a train going by.
Or a bus.
Or a bus. That got me and cat people. Man.
Yeah.
Man. But anyway, go ahead. What do you got?
Well, I have The Shining for the scene where the little kid is in his bed and the hook is instead of an axe, it's a hook that's basically breaking down the door.
Yeah. I got that. Yep.
And ironically enough, those movies came out in the same year. So they really didn't inspire each other. It just reminded me of The Shining. I already mentioned The Blob, the trick photography and the slow-mo type reverse shots they do with the fog to make it do what they want it to do. I guess you call it wrangling the fog.
Yeah, fog wrangler.
Fog wrangler. And did you know, and I think this was on the commentary, so you'll probably be able to guess it, but did you know where they lifted that spiral staircase from that's in the lighthouse?
Vertigo?
No. 20,000 leagues under the sea.
You mean the actual staircase?
The spiral staircase in the lighthouse was taken from the Nautilus 20,000 leagues under the sea.
No, I didn't know that, but that's a great prop. I'd love to have that spiral staircase.
The only reason I knew it is I think Carpenter mentioned it in the commentary, but I can't. It may have been something else I watched. But anyway,
wow.
A lot of this movie reminds me of Jaws because of the beach.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Especially the opening where they're at the campfire telling the ghost story. I'm like, is someone going to get drunk and go swimming?
Well, and then a bunch of drunk guys in the boat.
In the boat. Yeah. There's a lot of Jaws in this movie.
There's a lot. I wonder if Spielberg saw this.
I don't know. Well,
no, I mean, if he's kind of patterning after Jaws.
He could have. And the ocean plays as much of a character as the fog does, really, when you think about it.
True.
Yeah. Salem's Lot. There's a lot of Salem's Lot in this movie.
I've got that too. The gurney, the body on the gurney moving and everything.
The whole scene of Danny Glick's mother sitting up on the gurney is very much like the scene where the corpse sits up on the gurney with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yep.
However, there are scenes where Mrs. Cobritz is looking out the French doors and the fog is coming in, and it's very reminiscent of the fog coming in when Danny or Ralphie Glick are floating outside the window of Mark Petrie's house. Two things right there that reminded me a lot of Salem's Lot. And then there's a lot of Night of the Living Dead when they get to the church and they're like barricading the church and they're like hands coming through windows trying to grab people. I'm like, whoa, there's like a pedigree of horror films going on in this film, of influential horror films. So
there's a lot of Hitchcock in this movie too.
Yeah, there is.
There's a lot influenced by Hitchcock or references to Hitchcock. It was actually filmed in Inverness, which is just right down the coast from Bodega Bay, essentially where they filmed.
Bodega Bay, I think, is the fictional version of it.
Correct.
Isn't it? Yeah,
correct. Where they filmed The Birds, of course. Carpenter has been said that this falls into what he calls California Gothic.
I could see that,
which I thought was a unique thing, and he explained it as sunny places that hide scary secrets. Interesting. And he equated it to Psycho, which again, even though it's at a cliff, it's on the coast of California kind of thing. The Birds, Vertigo, all of those he called California Gothic. So I thought that was interesting.
That is a fascinating concept. I've never thought about that, but I would equate it. I mean, I equate a lot of those directors that came out of USC as like that school of film or whatever.
Yep.
I equate those writers, those fantasy writers that came out of California to get like Robert Bloch, Ray Bradbury, Harlan Ellison, all of those guys, are the same kind of school of California to me for some reason.
That makes sense.
That's just what I equate it to.
That makes perfect sense. And then Carpenter himself has said that the added scene of climbing up on top of the lighthouse and everything else was his version of North by Northwest with the Mount Rushmore climb.
Just a miniature version. Yeah, that's great.
Just a miniature version.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
The other ones that I have, most of these I lifted from IMDb. I've already mentioned that the film opens with an Edgar Allan Poe quote, which is everything is a dream within a dream.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little nod to Poe. John Carpenter has said himself that he was doing an homage to EC Comics. And that's why some of this probably doesn't make sense, because EC Comics stories never really made sense. We talked about that in Creepshow.
Yeah, they were essentially just vengeance stories.
Right. And on the opposite end of, or on the other side of the sea, the pond, as they say, Grand Guignol. Do I pronounce that right?
Guignol.
Guignol. Another director, George Romero, would also do this just 2 years later with Creepshow, which we just mentioned. So this is his EC Comics movie, and of course, Creepshow was George Romero's, and they were friends. We mentioned Play Misty for Me. You mentioned The Crawling Eye. Okay, you mentioned Alfred Hitchcock and The Birds. There are scenes that are actually filmed on the same locations as The Birds. One in particular is when they're on the dock getting on the boat to go out and look for the 3 guys. That dock scene is the same dock that is in The Birds when they're right a little further up in the restaurant.
Okay,
same dock.
There you go.
So, and it's just kind of ironic that it's not Tippi Hedren instead of Janet Leigh in this movie. And another little side note is that in The Birds, when Tippi Hedren comes to town, all hell breaks loose. Well, when Jamie Lee Curtis came to this town, all hell broke loose.
Yep.
I thought that was an interesting little thing I found on IMDb.
Again, that's why she should be the granddaughter of Blake.
Maybe she could be the catalyst. Yeah.
She's the catalyst. That would make sense. But yeah.
You mentioned the Wrecking of the Frolic, which was the original for this, but there is another thing that I found interesting. When driving to the lighthouse and she's flipping around on the radio, you hear about a search for the ship, the Seagrass, and the Seagrass boat, and you hear them mention Whately Point and Arkham Wreath. Both are names that are heavily used in Lovecraft works, which we know Carpenter is a huge fan of. So he's dropping terms, not only naming characters, but he's also naming places after stuff that he likes.
Yep.
There's also a quote when she's hearing the promos and the board fills up with water and catches on fire or whatever.
Yeah.
And the voice gets garbled. It's very Evil Dead. That's another key right there when you hear that. I
hadn't thought of that, but yeah, that's good.
The voice says something about an albatross around the neck.
Yep.
And that is, of course, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner from Samuel Taylor Coleridge, an English poet, excuse me, not lit. What else? Okay, this is something I found interesting. You mentioned Body Bags, which is not a great film, but Carpenter apparently has always wanted to do an anthology or type series, maybe. And in the 90s, he mentioned during an interview with Fangoria that he was interested in doing an anthology series based on this movie. However, the series would have not featured any of the characters, but the fog itself would be the catalyst for other supernatural stories elsewhere.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how you would do that, but
another Body Bags. Yeah.
There's fog in New Jersey this week. There's fog in Colorado, whatever. I
The
don't
fog
know.
is coming for you. Yes.
He implied that the series, as it progressed, would have connective ties to the film eventually, but this series never materialized, and instead they did a remake in 2005, which we all know how that went. And then two last little things. There's a very big Christ allegory in that picture behind me where Father Malone sacrifices himself for everyone else. So what is it I usually throw out there? The Bible. This movie's influenced from the Bible.
Yep.
And then in the final scene, when there's a wall behind Andy, there's a brick, and the inscription on the brick is H. Hawks for Howard Hawks.
Howard Hawks. Yeah. I've got one final obscure one that's weird that you probably didn't get, which is Pirates of the Caribbean. Even though these aren't pirates, they're motivated by their gold. They want to take vengeance against the town, but he also wants his gold back that you stole from me. And the whole reason that Barbossa and all of the ghosts in Pirates of the Caribbean are ghosts is because somebody stole their gold. So,
well, there's why people keep calling them pirates. Is they're making that connection.
I think it's your point of they saw a ghostly ship with tattered sails and they saw a cutlass sword. So obviously these have to be pirates, and I'm going, really?
Well, and there is, I was going to say, when you see the ship pull up against that little boat and you look up the mast and see the tattered sails, it does look like a pirate ship. Well,
it's a ghost ship, but it's not a pirate ship. You're judging these poor ghosts before you even see them, sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, again, we've droned on and on. So much of this movie is so good to watch and just sit and watch and enjoy. The music, some of the performances, definitely Dean Cundey's work. And although, the ghosts don't make logical sense, a lot of times in movies, ghosts don't make sense. They don't have to. They're ghosts. They can do
The Shining doesn't make sense in places. Yeah.
True. Who opened that freaking freezer door? That storage door.
And who is that dog going down on the butler?
Well, not that we have to know that, but yes, it's definitely happening. Yeah, there you go. So these are the questions that leave us as we're thinking through these cinematic works. Who's that dog going down on the butler? These are important.
I was going to look at my list. First of all, we'd like to wish everyone out there a Merry Christmas.
Yes.
We hope you've enjoyed indulging us for our very Carpenter Christmas, which started with Escape from New York, which we were both lukewarm on, and then In the Mouth of Madness, which we both hated, and then this movie, we pretty much both love it, even though David has some gripes about it. But anyway, I'll let you take it from. I was going to say before we are going to take a break. We are going to take off 3 weeks like we do normally over the holidays and come back on January 9th.
So that's a great opportunity for those of you who are new to us to go back. You can go to the website or through our YouTube channel and watch previous episodes that you haven't caught up on or haven't seen or listened to in the past. It's a great opportunity for you to consider, hey, it's Christmas. You know what I want to do? I'm going to become a Patreon and I'm going to give a Christmas present to Johnny Has the Keys. Even if it's just $1 a month, you get some special content, you get all kinds of stuff. And we would love to have you guys join the inner circle of our Johnnyites or our Keyites or
where all the cool kids are.
Yeah, it is. Key holders. Is that what we said or something? Maybe?
Well, we call them key holders. We do. We just haven't done that in a long time, but we did call them key holders.
So become a key holder with us, support us. Even if you don't want to do Patreon, then at least subscribe down there, ring the bell, as Tim said. Give us a rating if you go to, especially if you go to Apple, give us a rating there because it really helps us with their algorithm and all their stuff get out there.
The sacred algorithm.
Yes, and let us know what movies you might want us to cover. We're starting to work on next season's, putting the lists together for that. So we would love to hear from you guys with what you would like us to cover. Or we're actually toying with the thought of, since our first season didn't have any YouTube content or visual content, maybe redo a couple of our original episodes.
I think so.
In a video format. And if there are any of those that you would love to see us tackle visually, let us know that. And spend the next 3 weeks with your families and enjoy them and love them and take care of them, because there's some scary and some science fiction-y stuff coming for them next year.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming out. I'm amazed now that we do these coming attraction shows, how much stuff there is coming out.
Yeah. And Tim, Merry Christmas to you and yours. And we'll see you next year.
As always, David, it's a pleasure. I enjoy it.
You too,
Have
my
a
friend.
great 2022 and a even better 2023.
Yep. Getting better. See you then.
Yep. All righty. Bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.